I have got an XMC2 in here. This is the baby of the three processors. We have the RMC1L and the RMC1. All three are 16-channel processors. They can be configured in different room layouts, different speaker configurations. They quite literally can be set up as a 2.0 processor. We'll go through menu structures and turning those speakers on and off and things of that nature. But this one functions and sets up just like the other ones, other than the fact that the other ones have two displays, and there are a couple of more feature sets with setting what you would like the front panel to look at as you're using it with the bigger processors. But as far as speaker layouts, things of that nature, EQs, input setups, they're all the same. We've got the processor, which I kind of I like to name this the quarterback. Okay, so he's to dumb it down. Well, actually, there's some magnificently smart quarterbacks, but anyway, not to put it in that fact. But this guy does all the routes. He does all the play calling. He brings the information in and he shells it out to its proper location. So he kind of takes in the information from your sources, and I have several sources here. Got Samsung Blu-ray player, Sony Blu-ray player, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV 4K, a Roku Ultra, Oppo, that's the 203, an old school Panasonic 1080 Blu-ray player. I've got a ERC3, our previous generation CD player, and then the ERC4 is actually out here in the lobby and down in the two-channel listening room. And then I've got an Xbox 360 here. This is Xbox One, not the Plus, but I think just the One.
I think it's just, yeah, the Xbox One.
Xbox One. Okay, so the processor receives the information from all this gear. He takes in its audio and video. He separates its video, sends it to the TV. He takes its audio, shoves it into what I call the lineman. So this is your muscle behind the brains. And it actually it's the driving force for the speakers. It supplies your power, the dynamic playback, and moves the cone surface to make the speakers sound really good and represent what the processor has done to start with. So that's kind of your signal flow, and then you've got the speakers throughout the room. I have a pair of our new T1 Pluses up here. These are our old T1s. Just to give you an idea, we took out the niche in the side, made it a little bit more smoother on the sides, and then we changed the crossover just a smidgen, just massage that just a little bit, use a little bit better a cap on them, so a filament in that, and so they came out really nice. So T1s up front. We have the T0s, which is a little babyer model. These guys have dual 6.5s. These guys have dual 5 1/4s. These are also displayed over in the payout room, where you buy stuff, and a little 2-channel setup. They're also the surround speakers in the huge Atmos theater over there. And then in the back we have some B1s. Which are some bookshelf speakers. Next thing is the A1s. These are a reflective or an on-wall hanging speaker. Okay, you can use it in 2 different configurations. Currently hooked up in this room, I'm playing those. There will be a time, maybe towards the end of class or right after class, we could flip it over to these and kind of get a feel for the difference between the two. And then in the very back with the grills off, up top, that's a new prototype. That's a new in-ceiling speaker that we're going to use. They have the air motion transformer tweeter just like these, okay? And we've housed that in there. It swivels a little bit. It's got the same Kevlar woven cone. I've got the grills off. The white grills that are on the speaker back here, they can be painted. They got the zero edge ring around them, and those magnetize on there. It's a really clean fit and finish. But these, I've actually got these set up in my zone 2 output, Since I decided to set this configuration up as a three subwoofers, it did eliminate 2 of my heights. So on the back of the XMC2 or RMC, whatever, you have a choice of doing the middle heights as either middle heights or dual subs. And for this configuration, since we have a 6-channel ceiling configuration in the other demonstration room, I felt like maybe a 4-channel here and 3 subs is kind of cool. Also, I dialed these subs in, phasing and things like that, and maybe if we have time today, outside of this class, I can show how to set up your phasing properties and find nulls in the room and things of that nature. Just a little fun stuff outside of Emotiva setup. So the subs. So those in the, where I was going with that is the 2 in the middle there are on the zone 2 output from this, and we'll play with that a little later on. I think let's start from scratch, okay? And I'm sorry I did a lot of room setups this week leading up to this. I didn't really lay out, and it probably is already obvious, but I didn't really lay out a formal game plan. But this is the menu. So the menu setup, it does overlay anything running in the background, whether it be Dolby Vision, 4K, HDR, and that's pretty unique. A lot of processors cannot take the on-screen information and lay it over this. Number one, a lot of times the screen colors change when you go Dolby Vision, and it's hard. You have to remap the whole menu for Dolby Vision, and then as well, every time you change from like 480 to 720 to 1080 to 4K, your lettering has to change. So it gets bigger and smaller depending on, so we have to remap that layout, and then just to put it over the background image is another difficult task. So most processors that do 4K, they typically go to a phantom input, and then they bring you up a splash screen and things of that nature. So it's pretty nice. I like that. There may be a little advantage to the splash screen in a sense that you can, I don't know, it's like it got a GUI icon and you can kind of see the speaker layouts, but on the fly stuff and setup of this nature, it's kind of nice to have whatever content playing in the background so you can see your changes live. So as we go into the setup, let me step it back, okay? So typically when I bring up the menu, is because I was in setup earlier, it went back to setup, but when you bring up the menu, you're typically on main zone. Main zone is basically functions of the remote, but they're on screen, okay? So that's all that means. I'm in the main zone. This is what we call the main zone, the main listening area. And then zone 2 typically is an outside room, maybe a porch or a kitchen, or maybe it's whole home. Maybe you've got speakers in multiple rooms. But this, the industry standard is kind of like this is the main zone, and then you have other zones that are outside that. When we're in the main zone, you can go through here and change aspects of what's happening right now. And that's also the same functions that are on the fly with the remote. I have a lot of guys that will call me up and say, hey, man, I went in here and I was on HDMI 2, but I wanted my audio path to be, say, optical. But when I turn the processor off, let me see if I can, so I'm on HDMI 2, maybe HDMI 2 is my cable box. And I think I went to a source that my audio path from my cable box is optical. It'll retain the last video playing, so I'm still watching HDMI 2, but now I'm listening to optical 1. I did this in the main zone. So this was an on-the-fly, what we call an on-the-fly setting. And a lot of guys will say, hey, I went to another input, or I turned the unit off and I turned it back on, and now my audio path is is lost. My audio path went back to HDMI 2. And that's because this is a temporary, what we call like a temporary setting. So if you want to make that provision hard fast, you would do that in the setup menu, and we'll go there and I'll show you that in a minute. But just keep in mind, when I'm on the main zone, this is just on the fly or temporary settings. If I do a trim setting here, if I change the level of my center channel or I change the level of bass, and actually let me get this back and go there. That's playing DTSX from the Samsung player here below, the first input. Okay, so yes, volatile was a good, so bass loudness, management, things of that nature, trim levels. These are individual levels of the speakers. So you got your height, your center. That controls all 4 height speakers. That controls all 3 subs that I'm running, things of that nature, which is also on here. You have center, sub, surround, and height. So this is the same thing. And as we say, you know, if we change inputs or I turn the processor off and turn it back on, these will zero back out. This is kind of like a temporary fix. I'm watching this movie, wife's asleep, bass is rumbling, things of that nature, and I need to turn down or I can't really hear the vocals. I got to get it so loud that I can't tangibly hear what they're saying. So I need to lower the level. It's in night mode, and I want to bring center up. You can bring center up and then wake up tomorrow and everything will be, after you turn the processor off, turn it back on, it'll be back to where you were. Lip sync, tone controls, there's your bass and treble. Again, these are, and these are shelves, just so you know. I have boost and cuts. My treble frequency, I can actually change that. It's at 10,000 hertz, but basically it's saying 10,000 hertz up to 20K. I'm moving that whole shelf up, okay? 100 hertz and down, 100 hertz to 0, I'm moving that whole shelf up or that whole shelf down, okay? So it affects all frequencies above and below, and I can change this. Maybe I want to bring this down to 50 and just, you know, change this shelf below 50. This is also available in the setup menu if you want it to be permanent, but here it's temporary. Surround modes, you have different surround preferences, and that's just like hitting the mode up and down button here on the remote. You can choose your playback characteristic that you like. And as the content changes that's coming in, those options change. If I've got a 2.0 source coming in, it will change to things that are privy to 2.0, and then as I play a surround sound content, a multi-channel content, they'll change again for that. Speaker preset. The unit has 2 speaker presets as of right now. We will add Dirac very soon. We're working on that. I know that's the most common call. I know that perked a lot of ears right then. So Dirac is coming. We're working. Every effort really is set on that. So that'll be very soon. But presets, these speaker presets, you can basically change the complete configuration of your room. And I'll show you how to set up those speaker presets shortly. But you can, just by toggling this, which also is on here, speaker preset button, you can change the whole characteristic. I can have a, like we have in here, what have we got? We've got a 9.3.4 config. I've got 4 heights, 9 bed channels, and 3 subs, so 9.3.4. I can easily go to preset 2, which may have a channel configuration of 2 speakers large. And just by toggling that, I have changed the whole characteristic. And that's good for, say, a guy that likes to listen to CDs in 2-channel, and then a guy that also wants to flip to his Oppo and listen to, you know, the complete surround sound. You can set up those speaker configs. Those speaker configs can also be assigned to a specific input. So just by changing from HDMI 1 to, say, balanced in, my whole speaker setup just changed. And we'll dive in a little bit deeper there in just a second. So really, really flexible. There's your input, so I can scroll through inputs here. I named that one Samsung. That's HDMI 1, but it's just a representation that you can name the inputs to be what you would like them to be. And then I have information. This is very helpful to us on the tech call when you call in. A lot of times this tells us a lot of stuff. Two things that are key elements here are the network, especially if you're troubleshooting Dirac, and then the firmware version. Those are really the only two key elements that we key in on. These versions are kind of in the background for engineering. Typically sales staff don't really attain to those. They don't really mean much, but this firmware version, this is a beta code that we're running here now as a 1.6 and really 0.8. We had to put the slash in there. The code thing they had to, but anyway, 1.6.8, and then the date that it came out, 10/29, so just a few days ago, and then year 19. So the network IP, a lot of times this lets us know if you're like, hey man, I've got my app out on my phone and it's not seeing the RMC or the XMC, and well, sir, what's your network IP? Oh, well, let's, if I don't have an IP there, that means we're not getting a connection outside the box, whatever. Maybe need to unplug the cord, maybe move ports, maybe unplug the router, plug the router back in, things of that nature. But that's what this, and also this friendly name, that's kind of nice. Just in the regards of if you're pulling out the phone app or you're pulling out, or you're running Dirac, that name, in the building, sometimes we have 3 or 4 of them on the network. So if I'm running Dirac or I'm using my phone app, I want to rename that RMCD or something like that, just so I know that I'm talking to the right one and I'm not controlling somebody else's in another room, if you had a couple of processors. Okay, so information setup, tuner. The tuner, and I'm not on the tuner right now, but in here you would set up your stations. You can, the frequency, I can down channel frequencies and pull up something. But if we get a frequency we like, we go down here to stations, go down to save station, we add. That automatically puts it in there just by going over there. That saved that station like in number 1 target field. You can rename it if you want to. I have options, but the name currently is FM 104.5. And so as I back out, I can go up here. See, now I got my stations. Stations 5, I just saved that one, 104.5. I saved these other ones earlier, 101, 105.9, 103. So that's your tuner. Zone 2, once you turn it on, right now it's off, we'll go ahead and turn that on. Back up. Now, right now it's following main. These buttons are also on here. Again, this is still kind of outside of the setup menu, so it's mimicking a lot of stuff that's on here. I have a Zone 2 power, Zone 2 volume up and down, and input. Right now it's following this, so whatever my main zone is playing is what my Zone 2 is playing, and I'll actually volume up Zone 2. And you see my middle height speakers, consider that being in the kitchen or the outside patio. I'm taking this multi-channel DTSX movie, I'm down mixing that to 2 channels, and I'm shoving it out on the porch. So you're listening to what's happening in the main zone. I can also, this might get loud, and I apologize, but I can change this to tuner.
The last spot.
So let's turn it down.
These 3 schools. At 12 and 1 Oregon.
Tuner tends to be a little bit louder than HDMI stuff, but so you can change your source in Zone 2. As long as it's not an HDMI source, I can go to any audio source. Let's go up to balanced in. So I'm listening to the CD player out on the porch. I got sidetracked. We have a Bluetooth receiver. Basically, you can come out of it, coax digital, optical digital, or analog, shove that into an input, sit out on the porch, pull out your phone, Bluetooth Pandora to it. It's playing out on the porch. And you can do that independent of what the guys are doing in the main zone. So this is going to be really weird, but I can sit in here and watch a movie. You can sit out on the porch and listen to music. Okay? So. I'm going to back out of that zone 2. I'm actually going to just hit zone 2 power here. A little note about zone 2. People call us sometime and say, hey, my little ring around my power button up here is flashing purple and it's off. Why is it doing that? Oh, sir, your zone 2 is on. Well, I never turned that on. Well, maybe somebody picked up the remote, fumbled around, hit this button by accident, hit the floor or whatever. They're punching buttons, volume up and down, and all of a sudden they've accidentally hit that, and so they've got a flashy light when the thing's off. That's just to let you know, hey, there's a zone 2 playing. Maybe you're making your neighbor really mad. You've got that blaring. You're inside. You have no idea it's happening. The little flashy light will kind of help you know that your speakers out on the porch are playing. So main zone information setup. All right. The fun stuff here. Let me go into the advanced menu. Since I did rename, I actually backed up my user config yesterday or Wednesday. And so I have a stored configuration, user configuration in the box, but this morning I came in, I said, I want to name input 1 Samsung. So I'm going to back up the settings again. It'll store all my user settings in that. I'm in the advanced menu. And I'm going to go down here to Backup Settings, right arrow over, up arrow, left arrow. And it says Internal Done. So all my hard effort, all my distances, all my speaker configs, all my crossovers, everything, preset 1, preset 2, I've deleted inputs. I have renamed inputs. I have made balanced in reference stereo. So I've set up a lot of stuff in here. I've put an effort into this. I've got, an hour worth of setup in here. I backed it up. You can also take a thumb drive, like a USB stick. You can shove that into the front panel, do the same thing, backup config, and it'll say USB done. Heaven forbid your unit locks up on you or something. You're like, guys, I'm sorry, we went through this. I can't get it to revive. I need to send it back. Back up your config on a thumb drive, throw it in a drawer. We send you a unit back. You're like, dude, where's my user settings? We try to restore those. Sometimes it doesn't, or maybe sometimes we need to replace the unit. Boom, wada bing, shove it in there, restore user settings, which I'm going to do in a minute, and you're back up and rolling. You're not sitting there for hours, resetting up stuff. So I have a cool feature. I backed up. I did do internal done. I'm happy. I've got my Samsung name that I took time to write that this morning. So now I'm going to go up here and I'm going to do a factory reset. So we can start from scratch. So this is going to come out of the box as we send it to you from the factory with all of the load defaults. I just did a load default, which is a 7.1 configuration. Nothing's named, nothing's really set up. This is just like it came off the assembly line coming to you. So one thing I like to do, me personally, is this standby power. Lowest power basically means when I turn this unit off, it goes to its lowest, like 0.5 watt setting, meets power recommendations or power legalisms for things that are on standby. We need to meet that criteria, and people are, green conscious efforts. So if you like that low power setting, you do have, in the low power setting, you'll have a bootload process, which takes, I think, around 45 seconds to load. But I like to set mine to a high power, which is video remains on. The real purpose and the reason why it's named that, we could say highest power or no boot load or things of that nature. But the real purpose for this is to back out of here and be able to turn the unit off and have whatever source is playing go through to the TV. Okay? So I don't have a bunch of surround sound stuff going on. I can pick up my cable remote. I can turn the TV on and off, my satellite box on and off, cable box on and off, whatever. Volume up and down the TV speakers. And not really worry with the stack of equipment. Okay, so I got my TV playing. It's basically taking this full surround sound gamut, down mixing it to 2-channel, and I'm playing out the TV speakers. Okay, so I can use my one remote. I can volume up and down, change channels, things like that, and I'm not worried about the thing. So we call it video remains on. That away in standby, it's passing through the signals. Now it's still awake inside. It's just black on the front. And it's shut down at preamp outputs, and it's sending the audio to the TV. Okay? So, but it's still awake. It's still taking full commands. It's still drawing some energy, you know. So right now I'm on HDMI 1, the Samsung. I can go to HDMI 2. It'll go to my Sony player. I've got these numbered. HDMI 1, 2, 3 is the Apple, the Fire TV, and then 4 is my little Apple, 5 is my Roku. That way when I'm in here testing, I want to go somewhere, if I'm like, what number was that on? So yeah, now I'm on the Sony. Anyone want to get really crazy? We can actually go up to the balanced in. I'll get there sometime tomorrow. Okay, balanced in. I'm listening to my CD player, balanced out, through the XMC, down mixing to 2-channel, which is already 2-channel, pushing it out the HDMI cable, going to the TV. My TV speakers are the stupidest thing. I don't know why you'd ever want to do it, but I'm playing CD through my TV speakers and watching HDMI number 2 here, the Sony. Which at this point, if it's a sound bar, it would obviously have to get its optical output from the TV to shove into the sound bar, and at that time, then only the sound bar would be getting audio from the TV. So it would need to get its audio from the TV, because this guy's not. He's pushing audio out the HDMI cable up to here. So oh, actually, yeah. So we could actually turn on zone 2. So now I'm listening on my porch. I'm listening to CD player. My TV's playing a CD player. I'm watching HDMI 2. I'm getting really confused now, but now see my toggle? It goes from amber, supposed to be amber. Put on your glasses, but it's toggling, saying, "Hey, my zone 2's on." So that kind of lets you know that.
Now that you're at this point, when you get ready to turn all the equipment off, you know, we're triggered. Is it set up like this? You got to individually turn everything off?
No, what happens at this point, all I do is turn off my TV. Okay?
Yeah, it's all turned.
So that's, everything else is, these, I don't have triggers set up on these. These actually would be off if I was running my trigger out of here and into here. These would have turned off a long time ago when I put it in standby. Okay? Sorry, I didn't, and you know, I do have a trigger cable, and I would like to actually shove that in. Just to
Like your CD player, your Blu-ray player.
Now those things, yes, you're going to have to individually turn those off. Now you would have to do that anyway. I don't have any commands for turning, other than CEC control, which I have a little regard for. Yeah, CEC likes to make its own decisions about things. Say I wanted to listen to my tuner on my TV, but the CEC command said, "Hey, you just turned off your processor. You can't watch the TV. You must want to go to bed. Your TV's going off." So it makes assumptions that you want things to happen. It may make it a little easier for the user in some regards, but if you want to do more complicated things, it makes assumptions. So use the remote. But trigger 2. All right, so in standby, this amp is off. I put a trigger on it. Hopefully my triggers, they should be set up, and that amp will turn back on. But in standby, basically that was that video remains on. That was the whole point behind that. We got down a little rabbit hole, but still probably some decent information there. But But now I'm back, still on balanced in, still on HDMI 2, still listening to my CD player. So we're still rolling. This amp came on, it's triggered. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get back on what I'm watching and hearing at the same time. So I'm on balanced in. HDMI 2 is my video. So I'm gonna hit number 2. And I'm gonna get my audio in sync with my video, and then you'll see. This front panel display is really important to us when we're troubleshooting. If there's something that's glitchy, something that the audio format, information, this information right here is very important to us. It tells us what you're listening to when something, if something's not working quite right. We like to know what's coming in.
Can you adjust the time for the on-screen?
You cannot. It is set. Yes, Gerald.
Might be a dumb question, but let's say I'm set up for 7.2 or so.
Yes.
Can you at home just 7.2?
Yes.
And I have something like Dolby True HD. Does the Atmos system interpret it as it used to be interpreted, or does it try to take it to a new realm of?
If you have a 7.1 speaker config.
Yes.
No, it will do native. It will do native.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. It's going to play it's not going to try to mix anything in there.
Okay.
Yeah, good call. Okay, so that information is really good. But as we were talking about that, I wanted to remember what was my video source so my audio source could match up. And it showed me my video was HDMI 2, so I wanted my audio to match, so I hit button 2, which is programmed to HDMI 2. So now I'm back in sync. I'm not listening to CD player anymore. I'm actually listening to what I'm watching. So this front panel information is really important for you and for us if you're calling in. So we are in the advanced menu, pretty much done with that. All right, so in the advanced menu, so we've got the video remains on. USB audio, UAC 2. That basically means if I take any computer and shove it into the USB hole, it's going to play, okay? Because this UAC 2 is turned off, okay? If I want, now that also limits you to 96K, because UAC 1, which is its default mode, only goes up to 96K. If I want higher resolutions from my computer, I have to toggle this UAC 2 on. But we have so many people that call us and say, hey man, I've shoved USB in and I have nothing. Well, it's because we're looking for, in the past, used to have, there wasn't an option for it, and it was always UAC 2. And so we were like, dude, you have to load a driver in. Although Windows 10 pretty much does the driver now, prior to Windows 10, it didn't have a driver for UAC 2. So we put the option in there now. It's going to work out of the box. You're going to get sound. So I'm at least half happy. I'm a little disappointed I can't go above 96. Well, come in here, turn on UAC 2, let Windows download the driver for UAC 2, play higher resolutions. Okay?
Does that work with Mac too?
Mac pretty much works out of the box irregardless. You don't have
Is that on
to.
the front panel that you're plugging into, or is it on the back?
On the back. Good. It is the square hole on the back, a more of a D-shaped hole.
Type A.
Type A, like an old printer.
So you just have to run a cord out to the front if you really want to run it right or.
No. Always stay in the back for music. This USB hole is only for updates and backing up configs and restoring configs. Always use a back hole for your audio. So those are the two things I like to change in this advanced setup. Is the video remains on, the UAC 2. IR in, front IR in, I can turn that off. That's sometimes helpful for guys that are using IR input on the back. We have found that some base stations, I thought I had a universal base station, but I put it away. Anyway, if you have a base station that sends out IR and you're coming in IR on the back, Sometimes it works best if this front IR in is on, or sometimes it works best if it's off. So you can kind of toggle that. But basically, if you turn off the front IR in, that means my remote control is not going to work through the front panel. So be aware of that, okay? Okay, advanced network. This is a little bit easier. You can disable DHCP. You can set all these things up yourself if you're network savvy. So in this DHCP active, so it's going to go out and it's going to ping your router, say, hey, please hand me an IP. It'll hand back an IP and it'll set it where the router says it to be, or you can turn off DHCP and you can manually set these things up yourself. This is also a nice feature for us if we're troubleshooting direct. Sometimes I'll ask a guy to turn off the DHCP, back out, okay? That sets it. This is actually the IP address on the assembly line when your XMC was programmed or RMC was programmed. And then, but you can go in there and manually set that. But toggling this and turning that back on and then backing out, actually that back out sequence makes it ping the router again. Hey, I'm looking for an address, give me something. Okay, so that's the method. And sometimes if they don't have one, I'll ask a customer to do that, to try to acquire one. All right, HDMI CEC. Okay, so this is what I want to avoid in some cases. It's necessary if you want ARC to work. Okay, ARC is audio return from the TV. If I want my TV to be an audio provision outside of these sources, these are my sources that are plugged in as inputs, but now I'm saying I want the TV because there's apps on there, there's a TV tuner on there, I want it to become a source. I need it to hand audio back over on the same cable that has been sending HDMI video up. I need that to be a two-way path. I need it to come back. So I turn that on for ARC to work. I go up here. I do like the volume thing because what happens with the volume thing is now my TV can say, hey, I'm watching TV tuner. I've got the TV remote in my hand and I want to turn up the volume and I want it to tell my XMC to turn up. So I turn on volume. So I enable CEC to begin with, which actually opens up the path for things to talk to things. Okay, to say, hey, I'm out here and I'm over here and I'm this product and I want you to do this now and not do this. And then we can ignore requests from products. So these other things actually can ignore requests, even though it's coming down the CEC line, even though the product's saying, hey, I want you to turn off, or hey, what are you? Or hey, I want you to take audio. You can ignore those requests. And so we've put chains in there to ignore. This input change, it is very convenient, but it can wreak havoc at the same time. The Apple TV is notorious for this. The new Apple TV Generation 4, it all the times, we've put a analyzer on it and we've watched it. And it looks at it and it's all the time saying, hey, who's alive? Hey, who's alive? Hey, who's alive? And if it doesn't get a response, then, and it's kind of pinging like the TV, and the TV says, oh, what device in my stack over here has CEC turned on? Oh, your Fire TV has CEC turned on? He's the one listening. This guy's pinging. That guy responds, and he says, oh, he's live. So all of a sudden, I'm sitting here watching HDMI 6, and it flips over to HDMI 3 for no reason. I'm like, dude, I never told you to do that. So this input change, you got to be careful with it. Now, it is nice if I'm going from, let's say I'm going from HDMI, I'm watching a movie here on this, but now I want to take my TV and I want to go to the TV tuner, I want to watch channel 4. The TV can report back to the XMC and say, hey, he just went to the TV tuner. Will you set yourself to ARC? So he sets himself for the audio provision and it works really well. And then the TV, you say, oh, I want to go back to HDMI 1. Okay, I want to go back to listening to Samsung. Okay, XMC, go back to the last used source. It's kind of funny though, some TVs don't remember the last used source. So what it says is it pings out and it says, who's active? Okay, I'm going to go to 3. My Fire TV is active. Okay, so it can make an assumption for whoever's talking.
Will your display tell you?
It will. The front of the XMC will tell you where it went, and then you'll be watching something that you weren't watching before. But power on and off. You know, you can turn that on. Say I'm going to bed. I turn off my TV. Turns off my XMC. Turns off whatever else is listening on the CEC chain. Things of that nature. That's that kind of all off in one thing. And you sometimes have to be careful with that because maybe I really I do want to put the XMC to bed and listen to night mode and kind of watch my cable program through the TV speakers. But I turn that dude off. I've got that power off thing. Then I need to be off. So the TV turns on. You know, no, I want to watch TV. So you didn't turn the TV back on. And then the XMC turns back on. I didn't want to do that. So anyway, it can make life easier, but it can make life harder. Okay. So back up, triggers. The trigger is pretty flexible. We have 4 trigger outputs on the back. They don't have times. I've had a million people call me up on the phone. They've got different amps. They want the amps to turn on. I want one to come on in 1 second, one to come off in 3 seconds. I want one to come on in 5 seconds. No timer, but it's got everything else in the book. Basically, the power. Do I want it to trigger the amp on or off when I turn on the main zone or when I turn on zone 2? Or maybe I want it to trigger on if both. This amp down here, it's actually running my zone 2 and it's running all my surround speakers. So it's doing a dual purpose. So I may want it to come on for zone 2 and I may want it to come on for main zone both, okay? Or maybe I have a dedicated amp for zone 2 and I only want it to come on when zone 2 is on but not when zone 1 is on, okay? This basically says, hey, I want the trigger to be hot when this input is on. My balanced in, ERC3, it has a trigger input. There's very few sources out on the market that have trigger inputs to come alive, okay? And so when I go to balanced input, I only want my CD player to come on when I'm on the balanced input. So I uncheck all the other ones. I turn off the trigger for all my other inputs because I want it to only be active when I'm on the balanced input, okay? You could set that up in a fashion too for, say, a screen, retractable screens. They've got trigger inputs. And maybe I want only that trigger to be hot with all my HDMI sources, but all of my audio sources, I don't want it to be hot. So I could untrigger analog, USB, AEC, coax digital, optical digital. So I could untrigger those so the screen's not coming down when I want to just listen to music. Okay, so a little flexibility there. Not super necessary these days, but just fun facts, really. Speakers, fronts, subwoofers, rears. What are my amps controlling? So I've got one amp up here at the top, 7-channel amp. It's doing most of my bed channels, okay? But maybe I got a 2-channel amp. I think Gerald was telling me earlier about a CMX6. He's got a 2-channel XPA2. He's got an XPA5. And so when he's 2-channel listening, maybe I just want this trigger to be happy when the fronts are active. But when my center, heights, my subwoofers, my rears, my surrounds, which subwoofers typically aren't on amps, but it's there just in case you've got an in-wall sub and you've got an external amp. But basically, the 2-channel amp could be on the fronts, and then the 5-channel amp could be on the heights and the rears and the surrounds. So if I'm playing 2-channel music, I'm not turning on the secondary amp, okay? And this is, it's smart enough to know how you've set up your speaker config. If I've only got 2 speakers in the speaker config on the speaker preset, I've turned all my other speakers off to none. Or it's smart enough to know the sound field that you've selected. If I've selected all stereo, then all my speakers are going. If I'm in a Dolby Up mixer, a Neural XX mixer, an imitation surround sound type field, it's going to turn on both amps. But then if I go to 2-channel, stereo or direct or reference stereo or something like that, it's going to know that only the 2-channel amp is active. So it knows what speakers are live and what speakers are not. Okay. Headphones. Do I want the headphone override? Okay, I take a headphone. I shove it in here. I didn't do the top one, so it's going to stay on. But right now with my headphone override, if I can find the cable, basically if I shove a set of headphones in here, the bottom amp should turn off. Okay, so headphone override, that means that that's active. If I toggle it off, for some reason, even though my preamp outputs on the back aren't working, I want to leave my amp on. Maybe I got a tube amp. Maybe I don't want my tube amp turning on and off. Most tube amps don't have triggers, but anyway, it's an example. But I don't want my tube amp, turning off and getting cold and having to warm it back up while I'm listening to headphones. So anyway, that's what that headphone override is. And these arrows tell you which way to go to make changes. They're kind of hidden, but if I arrow up, that's going to add my X, which means I'm overriding, okay? Which means if I unplug this, it's going to come back on, okay? And then, and say I have a down arrow. That would remove the X as I back out. So I have a left arrow, and I have a right arrow, and I have an up and down arrow. These are the ways that I can move as I'm in this field of view. Power, we're back to main zone and zone 2, so I can go over here. Now see, I still have directionals. Now I can't go any more further right, and I can't go up. So that arrow went away, that arrow went away. I can go down, I can remove the X, or I can go left and back out. Okay, so preferences. All right, so we're in here. I can make this OSD pop-ups. You ask if I can make the time longer, can't, but I can limit them. So currently I have all pop-ups available, which means if my soundtrack changes, if my video content resolution changes, it's going to pop up and tell me so. It's also going to come up for the menu. It's going to come up for any user commands. It basically is active all the time if something changes. I can also set that to user, which means that only commands from me pop up on the screen. So my volume pops up, menu pops up, information pops up. Anytime I hit a button on here, it does come up, but it does not pop up if the audio type changes. So I'm watching cable TV and it's a regular Dolby Digital program, and then the commercial comes on and it's a 2.0 source or something, and so my processor wants to tell me, hey, you just went from Dolby Digital to 2.0, and I don't want that information coming up. So just put it on user, and it'll only come alive. And then you can say none. Maybe I never want to pop up. Maybe this is close enough to me that I can see what volume is, I can see what my input is. You can also change this front panel to say real big what the volume is, or it can say real big what sound fill mode you're in. We'll get there. I'm down a rabbit hole. So if you don't want this to pop up all the time, or you don't want any information to pop up, and all the information is here and it's all you need, you could turn it off, okay? Friendly name, here again I can rename the processor in case I've got a couple of processors in the room. I can tell it which one I'm actually talking to. As far as looking at like an app, like I'm coming in through the network. I keep doing that. Y'all don't know what I'm doing. My phone is in my pocket. I keep saying app and controlling with it. Anyway, if you're using your phone app or you're using Dirac and it's searching out on your network to see how many processors you have, you can name the processor. This is where you would name it. You would go over status display. So that is, okay, this is where I change the front panel. Okay, I can have just input. So I can back out of here, and instead of having all that information that was up there, now it just says HDMI 2. So I can see that from the captain's chair, you know. So preferences, I'm going to put it back to full status. I can also see what type of audio is coming in. That's our bitstream type, whether it's PCM 2.0, PCM 7.1, PCM 5.1, Dolby Digital, DTS, whatever type's coming in. The surround field mode, that's the audio type I want going out. That's the up mixer or down mixer that I've chosen, my sound preference. I can put it on input, I can put it on volume. Maybe I just want a big volume status bar up there showing me where I'm at.
For the RMC, can you do that for both sides?
Exactly.
Independently?
Independently, both sides, yes. You can do full information on one, you can do volume on one, which is actually the default. So I probably shouldn't have mentioned that one, or you could do full information and input, or maybe I can do bitstream type, what audio is coming in, what does the processor see coming from my player, and maybe I want so input type and the input I'm on, like HDMI 2 or Samsung. Okay, so yes, independent on the other one.
Turn it off. Can you turn it off?
You can't, the front bright. So if I want to turn it off, I would go front bright. I could bring that front brightness down to 0. And then it'll come alive when I hit a button, but then it'll go back to sleep if I'm in a dark movie room. Must have got really close to her name. I'm not going to say it, but all right. My watch does that to me all the time. Volume, max volume. Right now, 11 plus 11 is as high as it goes. That's the factory default, but maybe I've got some young teenagers or something like that really like to rip the knob off, and you come home and your mid-range is fried, once a month. You can come in here and take this down to like, negative 18 or something that's loud, but I don't really want to break this threshold type of thing. Turn on volume. I currently have it set, or the default is last used. You can set that to a fixed volume. Maybe every time it turns on, you want it to be at negative 30. Maybe I like to listen to a movie loud at night, and that's my common habit. And then my wife comes in the next day and pops the thing on, and she's, "Whoa, what did you just?" No, okay, honey. I'll set this to negative 40, and that way it's subtle, no matter how you left it the night before. Input, last used input. Maybe I want it to always be HDMI 1. Or maybe I want it to, maybe the cable box is the primary thing and it's on HDMI 1. That's 90% of my viewing, so I want it to always come onto that, no matter that I was watching my Oppo on HDMI 4 the night before. LFE level, that's the volume of the subwoofer. That's just the LFE track. To be specific about that, movies are recorded. That LFE track is the 0.1 track. So you got a 7.1, or you've got a Dolby Atmos, and it's a 7.1.6. This is the volume level specifically for only the LFE. It doesn't talk about the sum bass management, things of that nature, the leftover content from the small speakers. That's sum bass. It doesn't have anything to do with that, just level, LFE level. OSD pop-up, so we're back around there.
Is that permanent, the LFE level, if you change it there?
In this, it is. Once we're in setup stuff is permanent.
Okay.
Good ask. Transparency, so we can make that darker or lighter, depending on how much I want to see through the menu and see the background content. This is more just kind of fun stuff. Once it's set, you can kind of leave it. Okay. We're back to full status display, brightness, okay. Inputs. All right, so we got our inputs, HDMI 2, that's the current input that we're on. These do change live. So if I'm navigating this menu and I want to go to an input to set up an input, know in the background it's going to make that change, okay? So it is somewhat slow, but it is live, so you can actually make changes to the input that you go to, and you can see it happening instead of guessing, well, how loud would this be and what should the volume be? So I'm in HDMI 2. I have a playback mode, 5.1 mode. This is saying any content that is in a multi-channel surround mode, I would like it to play back in XYZ type. So I can go over there. Auto is saying I want it to pick the best thing, meaning if I put in DTS, I want it to use a DTS up, neural up mixer. If I put in Dolby Digital, I want it to do a Dolby surround up mixer. And when I say up mixer, sometimes you're playing content that's Dolby Digital 5.1, but I've got some front height speakers. I'd like those to play. So it's going to try to make some phantom information go up there. So the auto mode kind of selects best audio type. I like leaving it there, but you can, of course, some people like all stereo. They don't care what the content is. I agree, kind of weird, but sorry if somebody likes that. It's not weird. It's just
I like it with
you like it that way.
way.
Yes. Some people even like it with like cable TV or a movie. They're like, dude, I paid for 16 speakers. I want to listen to 16 speakers all the time. I want voices behind me. I want every channel in the room playing. I want to hear it everywhere. So you could go in here, and maybe for your cable box. Maybe the cable box, maybe it's not a movie and you not really care if the bullet's going from front to back, but you want to hear, you know, the news out of every speaker. You could go in here and set your HDMI 2, your cable box 5.0 mode to all stereo, and every time it's playing a surround content, it will play in all stereo.
What if you're getting a surround signal coming in and it's not in a surround signal? It's like in a PCM2 channel. What's it going to do? And you've set it to like, that probably didn't make sense.
We're going to do that now. I know where you're going. I'm sorry. So if I'm in 2.0 mode is, say it's not a surround, you're playing music from, say, Pandora, Rhapsody, something of that nature. Or I'm playing a CD player, or I'm got that Bluetooth dongle in the back of here that we sell, and I'm Bluetoothing, or anything that's 2.0, music from the computer, 2.0 music. Anytime 2.0 comes up, and if you were to set this for your cable box to be all stereo, probably want to come into the 2.0 mode, set it to all stereo, because when a commercial comes on, it's going to make some kind of fictitious up mixer. It's default mode, because Dolby requires us to do this. Auto, when I see 2.0, is going to be a Dolby surround up mixer. Okay, that's its default. Now you can go in and hit your mode button here and change it on the fly, or you can go in here and permanently set it. And in that note, in that regard, let's say I'm on a Blu-ray player, maybe the Oppo, and I really enjoy my music library, my 2-channel stuff, to be just 2 speakers. So I would put my 2.0 mode to stereo or direct or reference stereo, but then I'm going to leave my multi-channel mode in auto, so when I throw a disc in, all speakers are playing, but when I throw in a 2-channel disc or I throw in my USB drive, now I'm just listening to reference stereo. So one source can play back different speaker configs. I don't suggest doing that on like a cable box, because a commercial, you lose half the speakers in the room and it's kind of distracting, and then the show comes back on and you got all the speakers. So, but something like a Blu-ray player where you know the content and you have control of the content, then it's advisable.
Quick question for the 5.1 mode and auto. What is this if you're watching a 4K movie?
Yes.
What is the difference between the auto and the surround then?
Now I got you. If I do surround, no. Surround is going to play native what's on the disc. So if I put in Dolby Digital 5.1 from my cable box, it's going to play Dolby Digital 5.1. Your height speakers are not going to play. It's going to play natively what's ripped.
Okay. That's why I have mine.
Sorry.
That threw me off with the auto.
Yes. Auto is going to try to upmix, because Dolby says, hey, if you want our license, we want you to push everything Dolby upmixer. We want to splash our name everywhere. So it's Dolby kind of requires us to take stuff that's not and upmix
But
it.
if you're watching Blu-ray music or something like that, that's where you would use that, because you don't want it being upmixed all the different channels.
If you don't, yes.
Right.
And you can permanently set it here. Okay, so every time it plays, it's going to play back that way. Or you can hit the mode button to surround, and it'll, great. I get you. What's the difference in surround? You the man. All right, and then this surround This is the upmixer surround. So this is native surround, and this is upmixer surround. Which means even if I put in a DTS, it's going to try to Dolby upmix it.
Yeah, not a fan.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, all right. And then even last used. So last used would say, oh, the last time you were sitting down and you hit the mode up button and you rested on this with this type of incoming content, this is the way you liked it, that's the way I'm going to play it back. And so that could be different with DTS. It could be different with DTS MA51. It could be different with DTS MA571. It could be different with Dolby Digital 5.1. It could be different with True HD Master 7.1. It's going to remember what the user selected when he did the mode up the last time that audio type came in. All right, all right.
Glad you're making this simple.
Is it? Is it coming out okay?
Out of the box as is, but if you like to play.
1-800 call Damon.
Oh Lord. Well, if you want your code to work, no. But yes, yeah. So, buttons. I can assign. I have 7 buttons on the remote here. Okay. Well, you've got a tuner, but it's laid in hard. You can't change that one. But I've got 1 through 7 here. I can change my button for any input. Okay. So, button number 7 is default balanced in. But let's say I only have 3 sources. Let's say I've got a cable box, I got an Apple TV, and I got balanced in. Okay. So I want to lay balanced in on button number 3. I can do that. I can replace. I can go to balanced input. I can change my button to input 3. Okay. So what's interesting too, I saw this the other day. I actually have an input 8, which was on the XMC1, but not anymore on the XMC2 and the RMC. So forget button 8. That it's not on the remote, but it was a button that was on the XMC front panel. We need to remove that. But nonetheless, I have 7 buttons that I can hard code on here for whatever source. Then you got lip sync delay, you got HDMI type. This is very important. I've got a legacy product. Maybe I've got an old satellite box or an old cable box, or I've got an old Panasonic Blu-ray player. It is best to use the jack on the TV that has the highest capability, or you go into the input setup menu of the TV and say, I want to use like enhanced or best possible or 2.0 mode. Set the TV to its highest capability, or use the hole in the side. Some of them say 60 hertz, some of them say 30 hertz, some of them say XYZ. Use the one that's the highest. So it thinks everything is 2.0. And then let us be the master. Let us be the controller of that. If I see a source that is a 1.4 source, this is the HDMI type. I can set my input number 7 to be a 1.4 B type or a 1.4 type, and all my other sources are 2.0. This makes things to handshake a little bit easier, especially with old cable boxes or old satellite boxes or old players, to change that there. Audio type, here's where I said way back when we started the course, I changed the audio mode in the main zone. Okay, and then customers will call me and say, hey, I put this on optical last night and I was watching my cable box, but I woke up this morning, I turned the processor on, and now it's back, doggone, it's back to HDMI 1 audio, and I don't, why? So go into the input, the audio, or the input, and then change its audio type, change it to optical here, and it'll retain that every time you turn it on, okay? So maybe I don't want to do HDMI audio, and maybe I want to do optical. You can do that there, okay? This is a really cool feature. I like to do this because I have a lot of pieces of gear here. I have more than I have buttons, okay? I want to use arc return. I want to use AES EBU. I want to use coax digital and optical digital, and somebody's calling me. Okay, so yeah, I'm using more than 7 inputs. And so what I do is I go in here and and I check that off. Now, it is invisible to the input up command, but it's laid on a button. It's on button 2, so I can directly access it with the button 2 press. But if I'm doing input up to navigate all of my sources, and I have to navigate through 16 sources, it takes forever. So what I want to do is I want to come in here and turn off all the jacks that I don't use, and I want to turn off all the jacks that are laid on a button. Now I'm only toggling through 4 sources. I'm not toggling through 16. Okay? Level trim, like we did a while ago, we turned that tuner on and the speakers, oh my gosh. If you want to go in here, usually HDMI sources, you can bring those up 4 or 5 dB. Go into your audio sources like your balanced and your tuner, bring those down 2 or 3 dB. And then as I'm cycling through inputs, I'm not getting this huge variance of sources. Okay, so you can level trim each individual input. Speaker preset. So this, I can hard code a speaker preset to an input. So my balanced input for my CD player, I want my front 2 speakers large. I don't want a center. I don't want surrounds. I don't want wides. I don't want heights. I don't want. And so I can set that up. And for my balanced input, I can set it to preset 2, which only has 2 speakers active, large, and no subwoofers, and play right along. Okay? And then I can come back to HDMI 2. I want speaker preset 1 because I want all 16 channels to be active. I want my crossovers to be active, things of that nature. So just by changing inputs, I can change my speaker layout. Kind of the same, little bit different principle with mode. You know, the mode is the sound field type of up mixing and down mixing, but the speaker preset is actually how many speakers are in the room. We have 2 speaker presets. As you go into these speaker presets, you've got all your normal stuff for most receivers out on the market. You got your size, which actually includes whether or not the speaker is active or if it's small or large and if there's a crossover. So in this setup, this actually determines how many speakers are in the room. I can't really turn off my fronts, so sorry. But you can set your center to small, none, or large. If it is small, it basically is saying, okay, I've got a smaller speaker here, and I want a crossover. I want the bottom end to roll off, okay? Let's say I've got a pair of T1s. Somebody asked me this specifically before we went to lunch, and I don't know if I don't think he's in here. But he asked me specifically, hey, I have a pair of T2s. Where would you set the crossover on those? Personally, I'd probably set it at about 50 or 60 hertz. And then for like a T1, I would probably go probably 70 hertz. A T0, you might want to go 80 hertz. And I base that really on the woofer diameter and really how much low frequencies it can handle. As you get into really low frequencies, things below 50, 30 hertz, you're getting long sine waves. And really the driver to create a huge low frequency wave like that, it has to move a whole lot of air, whereas you go to a 10, a 12, or a 15, it can handle those lower frequencies more. So a lot of times I base my crossover on what the driver can handle. I also have looked at Dirac on the XMC1, and I can look at, it actually does a test tone frequency for a full bandwidth. And so I look at what it recorded for the speaker and where the speaker started naturally rolling off. You can see, where it started dying, and you can say, I'm going to set my crossover at 70 because it started naturally rolling off at 70. But anyway, if I select large, a lot of people like to go large because they're like, dude, these speakers are huge. They're large speakers, and why isn't my subwoofer working? In the large setup, it assumes that you want to play all frequencies through here, bottom to top range. So if I'm playing a disc that is recorded in a 2.0 fashion, no LFE channel, nothing past the 2 point, then I'm not going to get any information for the subwoofer because I've told the processor I've got a large speaker, so it's going to play. It's probably not appropriate to be on center, but just assume I'm on the right or left. But it's playing all the information from the disc because I've set it large, and so there is no leftover content for the subwoofer, and there's no recorded content for the subwoofer. Now, as I play a movie and I have my front set to large, then I'm going to play the channel. I'm going to play all the information that's recorded for that channel, and then I'm going to have a 0.1 channel, an LFE, that's hanging out there for the subwoofer. So now my subwoofer, when I play a movie, my subwoofer is going to come alive, even though I've set it to large. But the size menu basically sets all the parameters, whether it's a speaker, even in that location, whether it's large or small, and what I would like my crossover to be in that fashion, okay? So I've got front, center. I will go ahead and, just for fun, we'll go into small, go over again. Oh, you see the little tickers out here? This tells me where I can navigate to. Always pay attention outside the boxes there. And as you can tell, it's really wise to have it on screen. This 2 lines of information leaves a lot to be desired. If I back up, where I have a lot of speakers, see, I'm only seeing a portion of where I can go, and so when I have the on-screen display, it really gives me a lot of information. So it's always good to have a TV, even if you're doing a 2.0 system, to throw a TV up just for the menu. So I want to go over. I'm going to go ahead and set my fronts. I'm going to bring those down just because a little bit bigger speaker. Now, what happens to that information below 60 hertz? It's going to go in this configuration. I have a 3 subwoofer configuration. There's many ways that I can set these subs. Mono says I'm going to receive LFE, which is the recorded subwoofer channel on a movie. And it says I'm going to play any content left over from small. So you'll notice our subwoofers don't have a crossover. They have a dB slope, but they don't have a crossover. But what it does is it's very intelligent in the fact that it's going to say whatever you have crossed over out of this, so 60 hertz and down, is going to go to my sub. This guy over here is 80 hertz, crossed over at 80 hertz, so 80 hertz and down is going to go here. The backs say they're at 100. The 100 and down, say my heights, my ceilings, they're at 120 or 200. 120 is going to go down to the sub. So it's very intelligent per speaker to say, okay, this content doesn't need to be overlapped, and it also doesn't need to be dumped off. So whatever you set here, that is what we call summed bass. Okay, and summed bass is the bass from all the speakers. Now, there's a lot of background in that. When I talked about we kind of rewrote bass management from 1.5 to 1.7 that's coming out, is we kind of went back to the drawing board on that. So if I've got if I've got 7 speakers, or I've got 16 speakers, or I've got 3 speakers, or I've got 6 speakers, whatever I've got, my summed bass is going to change. That level of summed bass is going to pile up. So we have to take the number of channels, multiply those, divide them, and then take the sum, and then bring that level back up when we mix it back into the speaker. So there's a lot, and I really slaughtered that. But I'm just saying there's a lot of understanding there in the background, depending on the number of speakers, what speakers are set to large, how much dumped information, how you're doing that. So in this particular configuration, I'm going to set up my front woofers as dual monos. And then I'm going to set, I've got a large 13 back here in the back, and he's taking a really close inspection back there, and that's beautiful. So in that note, I'm going to set it up for LFE. So that subwoofer will only play the LFE track off of a movie recorded with LFE. And my 210s up front is going to take all my summed bass because I'm going to set them to, and we'll get there, and maybe I'm going a little premature here, but these two guys up here, I'm going to do dual mono. I'm going to do that guy LFE. So he's only going to play when I put in movie content that has a subwoofer recording. And my LFE is not going to be played in any towers, not going to be played in these subs. But these subs are going to take all the leftover content from this, from that, and it's going to sum into that. And it's a 10, it's small, so it's going to be very fast, very accurate, and very clean. So all my leftover bass that was recorded in the studio is going to be represented really quick that this guy can't handle, but yet all my LFE, the big, the big explosions and the big things like that will be handled by him back in the back.
No, can you do that if you have it hooked up like you did over there?
No, you're gonna have to have individual. He had asked me before we left, he wants to do 6 channels in the ceiling. And so he only has the provision for 1 XLR output. And so he's going to have to daisy chain his subs. So they're only going to get the same signal for all 4 subs, all 3 subs. Whereas in here, I opted for 4 speakers up top. So my middle speakers are allocated to right and left sub. Since we have a 6 channel over there, I wanted to do a 4 channel height, 4 channel in here. All right, so I went way down a rabbit hole there. But that's, when we do this, when we set the front crossover, that's what we're basically doing. We're saying, I'm gonna take everything from 60 hertz and down away from these speakers, and I'm gonna dump that into any subwoofer that's set up for mono, okay? And that's gonna be my summed bass. You're gonna go through each speaker, you can do that. I'm gonna get up to, everybody kind of knows fronts, centers, surrounds, and rears. So we know those. We know small and large. We know none. By the way, I could do a 5-1 setup here where I could turn off my rears, set those to none, and it would play, in the remaining 5. Then I got front widths. Kind of a cool thing here. We actually I did biamp. So you have large or small. Now width is left, center, right, and width is beyond the right and left. So you actually have 5 speakers up front, and those widths are what we're turning on right now. There's very little content out there that actually is recorded with width, and right now we don't have an up mixer that adds information to those. So if you do this setup, currently they're probably going to play maybe 2% of the time. It depends on the movie content and if that channel was actually recorded in the movie. We upmix right now to a 7.1.4. Okay, so if you have any content less than that, we will make up information up to that. But we won't make up information for middle heights, and we won't make up information for wides. Okay, so, and then we also have biamp. People were really wanting that in the XMC1. Finally got that in the RMC1. So I can take my widths and I can actually make them biamp. And no, they don't have independent crossovers. I'm sorry. It will mimic whatever your fronts are doing. So it just basically says I have 2 more front speakers. So you can come into an amplifier, say, and use 2 channels to drive this speaker, the top post and the bottom post, remove the jumpers in between, and you can have double the power and really have the tweeter mid-range separated from the woofers, which gives you a nice control too. So we got our front widths, and now on our front heights, we have a lot of arrangements here, okay? You have small front height, large front height, and when we use the term height, in my little air quotes, that is a speaker that's mounted on the vertical wall and firing down, okay? A top speaker right here would be a horizontal plane. That's the plane, that's if I have it up in the ceiling coming down on your head. Change live. So you can actually hear it as you change it, and you don't have to back out. Some companies will navigate a little faster here, but then they compress it. They take their time when you back out. You back out, and then it runs the algorithms and it applies everything you've done, where we're kind of applying things instantly, which then to us as an end user, waiting on that movement is sometimes hard. But as you can tell right here, there's a lot. So when I change one location, it's kind of rewriting what that location's doing. And so if I move several, it's kind of rewriting the location every time it moves to that place.
But it's real time, so you actually hear the difference. So if you don't like it, you can switch back.
Exactly.
Back out of the menu and have to go back in. And
Exactly.
Or versus changing 15 different things, you back out and go, this sounds horrible,
Go
where
back
do I
in.
start?
Which one?
Are you only doing it on the Dolby enabled, only on the front channels? You can't do it on any of the back channels or?
Do
that-
what? Can't do
Well,
what?
that reflection off.
Yes, yes, you sure can. Any height speaker, you can do the Dolby enabled, and we'll go there. We will go there.
Because if you don't want to put it in the ceiling, you can.
Right. That is absolutely true. I'm going to change this crossover here real quick. It comes default at 250 because Dolby told us to. But really, I mean, they're decent. I'm going to put it at about 120, okay? So that's my front height. By the way, I'm running those and not these. These are here for look. We may play these later and just do the difference, but just letting you know what I'm actually got hooked up.
250 is the default?
250 is the default.
Okay. What's that crossover slope mean, or are you going to get to that?
I will. I sure will. I sure will. My rear height, I'm actually, those in the back, those are our prototype in-ceiling speakers, the ones with the grills off. And I know yes, you just, somebody put a flashlight. Oh, thank you. Nick's got a flashlight on it.
Okay.
So that's our in-ceiling rears. And they have the same exact tweeter as these, so they're voiced very similarly, and they have the exact same carbon woven basket and all that's ready to go. We have the zero line magnetic grill that goes on. You can paint those grills. They're sitting on the speaker back there in the back. You can take a look, but they do magnetize. We're really, so he's holding it up.
How effective are the rears being used as Atmos speakers, fronts and rears as opposed to overhead?
How effective is this versus actually having in there?
Or, even those up there and back here as opposed to the ceiling?
Oh, I get you. As a front height, I do like them in that location instead of having them in the ceiling firing down. I think I get more because it's aimed more towards the listener rather than to the ground. Even though if I had a swiveling tweeter, it may not. But the ones above head, I like the top really for the rain effect and things like that. That it is kind of coming down. It gives me that ambience that it's in that. Yes. So rear height, I'm going to do small top. I don't want to do middle. I want to do small top rear. So I got to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go in there. I'm going to bring that 250 down to, say, 120. And remember, all this information is getting dumped into the subwoofer. Whatever is left over from removing from the speaker, it gets dumped into my two small tins up here. And then my left and right sub. So my left and right sub, since I have, and this option for middles only comes up after I have set fronts and rears. If my fronts and rears had been none, then I would not get the option for middle because you can set those to middle, or it assumes you're not going to have middles here if you had no rears there, kind of thing. This is only, the option comes up because I have set fronts and I have set rears. And then I have the option for subwoofers, which as we have written code and as we've went through this process, having those jacks as a subwoofer and having those jacks as a full range speaker has huge implications in the background. It's so crazy. We've written code, going back and doing levels, doing crossovers and things like that. We have recognized that there are very specific routes that things have to go through because we've gave that option to change from a subwoofer to a height. The test tone generator, everything operates differently whether it's a sub or it's a full range speaker. So this was pretty intense, and we didn't realize until we went back and started testing code and saying, oh wow, like that's that subwoofer reason, you know, it's like because it has the option to be a subwoofer made things more complicated. But nonetheless, I'm going to do dual mono up here. I can do top middles. I can do Dolby Enable middles. And I can do mono. The purpose for mono, it only uses the left output, and really this comes back from the XMC days. We felt like some guys might want a subwoofer that only plays for movies, but not in their two-channel listening. So you could use a left subwoofer for two-channel music, but you could do dual mono for, say, movie content. So dual mono would activate the right jack, and that's kind of flowed over. If I use mono, it's only going to use left sub. If I use dual mono, it's going to use right and left sub. And basically, both of these 10s up here are going to catch all the content that I've just crossed over out of all my satellite speakers. It's going to go into those two speakers. And then we're going to go up to center sub, mono. Since I have two 10s for all my leftover content, right now, as that center sub is set at mono, it's basically getting LFE in the back, that 13, and it's also getting all my dumped content, what my summed bass is. Summed bass is the leftover from all the smalls, and mono kind of implies summed bass plus LFE. And then I'm going to throw you a little wrench, okay? If that's not complicated enough, I'm going to throw you one little fun 10-bit. The fact that I just set this to LFE, now my dual monos, they used to get LFE, won't get LFE anymore because I have a specific LFE channel, okay? So it draws that out of it. So now my 10 is not going super stupid on an explosion, but it's handling the leftover content from this guy really well. So it's a really cool thing. All right, the crossover slope, this crossover slope actually only applies to the subwoofer. And it basically is saying, do I want to make a hard, sharp drop off at my 60 hertz? I set these to 60. So my subwoofer is getting 60 and down, okay? Do I want that 60 hertz to be really sharp at 60? Or do I want to go 12 dB octave, which says, no, I want to draw that bass out a little further. The 12 dB slope just rolls out. So I go 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 150, 200. Whereas if I go 24, it's going 60 and 60, 70, 80, 90, 120. You know, it's removing information faster. So that's the two slopes there. The crossover slopes, so we did a 12 and 24 dB.
You prefer 24 because...
Oh, thanks. You the man. It really, unless I had a small 10, now the 10 is not bad. I think it could handle 12 very quickly, but if I don't have a driver that's a small diameter that can react really fast to higher frequencies, I like to make the crossover slope at 24 so I cut those higher frequencies out, because a lot of times it'll sound like this when you start trying to put higher frequencies through a subwoofer. It sounds like it's coming through a room and it's very muddy and masked, and then if you reveal it in a smaller driver, it can react faster and just produce that sound better. So now we've got our speaker configuration. Now we got levels. You can go into test tone levels. Takes just a second. What it's doing there is it's muting all my other channels, and it's sending a test tone to this guy.
Get an
SPL, huh?
get a meter.
And get a meter, yes. So get a meter. What I do, it may not be the best in the world, But the thing is I put the dB meter app on my phone and I sit out there. The whole purpose behind this is to make this speaker the same loudness as that speaker. Okay, nothing outside of that. And so if I'm just as bad with this speaker, I'm just as bad with that speaker. And so I'm getting a good level match from my speakers. Another thing you want to be, be aware of is when I'm setting levels, let me go to my dB meter. I like to do that because the microphone's at the bottom, but anyway, for better representation, actually I can flip it. So I'm seeing 70 dB, okay? Now, we used to have things out here that said 65, 75, 85. That's very confusing for customers. More to the point is, if I'm quiet, I'm showing 70, 71, but the more the point is when I go up to my center, is I would like it to be 70, 71 as well. Okay. Okay. So I'm close. I don't really, and I'm not looking for, oh, I need this to be all 75, I need this to all be 65, I need this all to be, what I'm doing is I'm taking a target from my front, using my left front, and I try to get every other speaker, all the other speakers in the room, to reach that same frequency, or that same SPL.
At that same position?
At the same position, usually the listening position. Not here, I'm in a really bad position, sorry.
So you may have to.
But I do that, I sit there, yeah.
And
I sit there.
And then you may have to add to bring it up to 70 or decrease.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do is right arrow over. And I'm going to do that for this one.
Not yet.
Is that what direct does a little bit, direct does a little bit of that too?
Yes, it will. So what I'm doing is basically going around the room and I'm matching what my left front started as, okay? Typically you do want about 70 dB of playback. I'm gonna back out so we can talk. And I wanna do that for all of them. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue with, left rear, left surround, left width, front height, front right. I'm gonna set all those all the way through, okay? But so we can talk here, I want to play back. I typically want a pink noise of 70 dB to 75 dB, just so I can overcome the ambient noise in the room, air conditioners or this, that, and the other. But outside of that, and what you want to do is when you go in there and you want to pick your level, and I'm on that left front, okay, and I'm reading 70 dB, I'm okay, but let's say it wasn't okay. Maybe my amp's not the same efficiency, maybe my speaker's not the same efficiency, and maybe I'm not getting the level that overcomes ambient noise in the room. So I come down here to my test tone, and I bring this up, and I bring it up to medium. Now I've got a new target number. So I'm at like 80 dB. So now I go through all my speakers and I get them all to 80 dB. You see? But the only purpose in going low, medium, or high is to overcome the ambient noise in the room. You want to get up around 75 dB, 70, 75 dB, just so that the microphone on the phone or your SPL meter or whatever is getting a good reading. And then we got distances. You can do the feet. Say your front speaker's 11 feet. There is, more recently, one of the things that from like 1.5 code to 1.7 code, one of the things he brought up earlier is we put a compound factor in here. It's not really helpful in feet because feet, you're usually not over like 15 or 16 feet. But when you do frequencies in the EQ menu and you want to change your frequency from 50 hertz to 2000 hertz, you were waiting a long time. But what we did was we put a factor in there. If you hold the button for a second, it starts compounding at a factor of 10. If you hold it for 3 seconds, it starts compounding at a factor of like 50. Okay? And then as you let off, it throttles back and it goes 1 at a time, and then it'll go 10 at a time, and then 50 at a time to get you there faster. Now you'll realize you'll overshoot, but then just kind of back it back down. Okay? I can go over to inches. Okay? I can change my inches, so 12 feet, 6 inches, okay? And then you can go on over here, you can do meters if you're in Europe or something, and you want to, you're doing your room by, and then it'll change the feet size. All right, and then so you go through and you do your distances, and this is just old school, tape measure to listener type thing. You do that for all the speakers in the room. And then your EQ. There's some fun stuff in here. In the equalization, you got a really nice EQ in here. You've got 11 bands for each of the 16 speakers. And you've got this twice. Remember, we got preset 1, preset 2? Lot of flexibility here. But as I go over, I can actually choose the frequency that I want for my band. So I've got a filter band 1. I've got that 11 times. I can choose any frequency that I want to boost or cut. I can adjust the Q of it, or the width. So these two interact together. I can actually look at the width of it. So I'm centered at 50. It's rolling off. I think it's half dB down at 30 hertz and 80 hertz. So I've got this hump, okay, that it's centered at 50 up here, but then at 30 and 80 it's half down. So if I'm at 50 here, 30 and 80 I'm half. And then if I'm even wider, I guess 15 and then 95 or whatever it is, I'm down at back 0 or whatever. Or I can change the Q, and the Q factor is the same thing. You change your Q, and it'll change the width. So I'm making the peak tighter. So at 38 hertz and 65 hertz, I'm half down. So I've now taken this. I've actually broadened it out. So I've taken, my Q went up, so my hump got bigger. And then as I bring my Q down, my hump gets smaller at the center frequency of 50.
And if you're using RAW, you get the Q. They'll give you the Q.
Okay. And then I've got a level for that. So I can boost or cut 50 hertz. Okay. I can do this 11 times 16. Okay. Now here is a really fun thing. The pink noise. So you can actually set up like an RTA out in the room, and you can go in here and do pink noise low. And this is not like the level noise that we heard earlier. Okay. This is real bandwidth to bandwidth pink noise, okay? So it's live, it's a generator that's built into the machine, and you got pink noise, and so I can sit there with my RTA, I can back up here, and I can go into the frequency, change the frequency, I can boost or cut it, I can go to another filter, I can go up here, I can boost or cut it, I can put a frequency in, I can go back, go up to another filter. So I can really level out my RTA. And then I'm done with my left front. So let's go over to the center. Same thing. Sit there and do the same thing again. I go in there, set my band, set my filter, change my frequency, change my booster cut, change my Q, whatever I want to do. And I can do that for, all the frequencies. Go around the room. I can be in here for 4 days, okay? So that's a pretty cool feature. And then one that I like that I use all the time when we go to shows, and actually did in here Monday before y'all came in. Oh, wait a minute, sorry. Is the sine wave. So I want to count where I'm going with this, because if I get into these, they get pretty loud and obtrusive. So I'm going to go up to sine low, so it's 3 pops, 1, 2, 3. If I want to navigate those one at a time, I could, but okay. That's my center channel. He's right now doing a sine wave of 100 hertz. I can change the tone frequency. That's different than this frequency. This frequency is the frequency that I'm going to boost or cut on this band, on this filter. Okay? This tone frequency is what this sine is generating. So we can actually bring that down. Oh, I got to get over to it first, Damon. So I can bring that down to, let's say, 80. Okay. Now I can even come over here, and let's say I'm going to go back to a speaker that can handle a little better, left front. So he's pretty cool. All right. Okay. So now I've got 80 coming out of the guy back there in the back. Okay. So 80 hertz sine wave coming out of my rear woofer. Now what I can do is I can come back here. I can unplug my rear woofer, and he popped out of the. So now my SPL meter in the middle should have increased. If it didn't increase, that means this subwoofer is out of phase with that subwoofer, and I can get back there and I can roll my phase so that they're both acting together and they're not sucking up the other one's energy. So I like that. And you can also tell the nulls in the room. So as I walk around, like as I go, like right there, there's almost no bass, almost none. And then I come back over here, it's like, oh, there's bass. And so you can recognize, it don't matter if I stack up 12 13s or 110, you're not going to overcome this. Either I've got to move or it's got to move. Right. So it just, a lot of people get confused, like, man, I've got this honking, JL subwoofer that I spent, $2,000 on, and I have no bass. What's going on? Well, one of two things: you got to move your couch forward a foot or back a foot, or you got to move the subwoofer in a foot or out a foot. You're gonna have to make the wife mad, because it's not gonna fit the decor. So something's got to move. But that's the only way really to cover. Power don't really overcome that. It's all about. But that's a really cool. And what I actually start with. When I actually do this, I just showed you the example of the subs and what you would do to dial in the subs properly, so that they're in phase. But honestly, what I did in here, the very first thing that I did was I made, since that subwoofer is the closest to this tower, I put my Y cord. I had this sine wave coming out of the left front. I put this Y cord from the left front, and I played this subwoofer and this left front. And I dialed that subwoofer in until I had the highest SPL meter at the listening position. And then I took the Y cord and did that to this one. Okay, so I had both of those going, and I dialed that one in to give me the highest SPL. And then I took that one and paralleled it onto that one, and then I got where they were working together. So, and I realized, you see it's in a kind of a weird configuration turning it like that. But that actually gave me about a 4 dB gain to swing it that way for something about this room, which we have a lot of room treatment in here, but firing it out straight was less. So anyway, just some fun stuff with subs. And really the internal test tone generator, you don't have to bring something to the job site to make these sounds. It's built in, and it's very, very useful for setup. So we did levels, we did EQs. You can change the name of this preset. Maybe I want to name it preset movie, and then I want to name my other preset music or something like that. And then you can assign these presets to an input. So yes, so as a guy switches from Blu-ray player to CD player, he can literally change the speaker preset, change crossovers, change EQs, change
And then save it all.
everything. Yes.
And then save it all. Put it on the CD.
So as when we started the first class, I did a low default. So I was working with basically all zeros out of the box like it comes from us. And so at this point in the game, and I backed up my settings before I did a factory reset, I'm going to restore my settings and go up. So all the time that I took, I didn't EQ anything, but I did set all levels, set all distances, I set all the speaker configs and things like that. And now it's loading back all that information that I worked hard on Wednesday, and I'm getting that back in. So I'm an hour, oh my goodness. So it took me 2.5 hours to go through front to end. But basically I've caught class 1 up